spotlight you and bring you to the screen. Thanks, Paul, for coming in. And we also have Harsh. So let me bring him to the stage also. Uh, and yes, just a moment. Yes. So now I need to introduce Hars Saraf. Hars is a co-founder and healthcare investment banking sector lead at Key Venture, bringing over a decade of experience across public and private markets. With deep expertise spanning healthcare, life sciences, medical devices, and health technology, Hars brings a rare combination of capital markets acumen and on-the-ground advisory experience. He has advised a diverse portfolio of healthcare innovators, including Dr. Reddy's, Curatio Pharma in life sciences, Monitra in medical devices, and THB and Flexify Me in health tech. An engineer by training and entrepreneur at heart, Hers is a trusted voice at the intersection of innovation and investment in the Indian healthcare ecosystem. So, welcome, Harsh, welcome, Paul, and I would now hand over the stage to both of you. Please take over, and we are looking forward to your conversation. Over to you.
Thank you,
Harsh,
Hemant.
yeah, Hemant, Harsh, pleasure to meet you, and thank you very much to everybody for being with us today.
Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here, Hemant. Thank you for setting this up and putting together such a beautiful platform for us to meet, and pleasure to meet you, Paul. Looking forward to our conversation.
Sure. Look, maybe just a small intro from our side. I'm advising a US-based venture capital firm called Frontier Path Venture Capital. It's a dedicated firm for investments in healthcare. And I think maybe from our perspective, definitely we'll be talking about global trends. But I think US still remains the biggest healthcare market in the world. I think actually it's the biggest industry in the US. So healthcare accounts for 20% of the US GDP. US spends probably 1/3 of global spending on healthcare, about $4 trillion. And I think if we are talking about the turnover of the healthcare products and services in the US, we're also talking about trillion dollar market. So just putting the total volumes aside, I think the US venture capital market is roughly like 700 billion, and we could definitely account for about 20% of that for healthcare. So, well, in magnitude of things, we are talking about the market of $150 billion just in venture capital for healthcare. And it remains the most liquid market. So all opportunities in terms of exits, like secondaries, like M&As, like potentially IPOs, although I think IPOs market still remains limited, are there. And for example, from our perspective, we see some great opportunities, in the Middle East. We see great opportunities in other parts of the world, but we always ask ourselves about the exit. So that's what we start with. And sometimes the opportunity could be very, very exciting. But when we ask how we're gonna exit this investment, it is becoming more challenging. That's maybe a short intro from my end.
Thank you, Paul. Let me turn on the table. So I'm Harsh from Key Venture. We're an advisory firm based out of India. We primarily work across mid markets for healthcare companies across life sciences and healthcare, and specifically focusing on technology and how it's intervening into healthcare and impacting tangible growth and tangible impact for the health quality it's delivered here. What we see in terms of healthcare, it's certainly not as big a market as Paul is sitting in, but I think it's one of the largest and the fastest growing markets amongst all the countries that you know of. The reason being that India realized very early on that it is not just solving for the problems of India, but it has a global market which it can reach out to. We are the manufacturers of pharmaceutical products for all across the globe. Large section, I think India hosts one of the largest number of USFDA approved facilities outside of US as such for pharmaceutical products. And that is the market that we're looking at. But when we look at India in specific, what we see is it's a market which is ripe for taking for the right players here, right? I'll talk about a few trends and maybe Paul can add to that. What we saw in India in the last decade, last 10 years, most of the healthcare ventures were currently focusing on solving for two key problems. One was solving for the opacity in healthcare, where you would not know where to go. You would not know where to get the right services. Second was the reach, where how do you actually get access to right quality of healthcare? We have seen that being solved for in the last 10 years. And the shift is being moved from that to quality of healthcare and niche healthcare services, which can solve small problems, which were really not that large a market earlier on. What it has done the last 2 years, last decade, has that there was evangelism in healthcare, where India as a market has moved from reactive care to preventive care, which was something which never existed. And that's where we see a lot of opportunities really coming out. And that's where we see a lot of private equity capital going in. Today in India, if you talk about subsegments, be it hospitals, be it diagnostics, be it pharma, we see large consolidation play happening across hospitals, where we see large corporate chains coming up with upwards of 20 to 30,000 beds. And these chains are actually looking to add another 18,000 beds in the next 1 or 2 years. So we see a lot of play happening there. We see a lot of opportunities there. Paul, I would hand it over to you to see what's it looking like in the US.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. Look, I think in terms of maybe themes or industries that we're seeing that of highest importance, growth, and interest, we really believe that AI enable solutions and AI enable diagnostics. It's very, very exciting, industry to be in. Then it's definitely remote care and home health care. I believe longevity is becoming very powerful, very exciting, and very interesting industry jointly with neurotech. And on the other side of things, because if you look at hospitals or if you look at medical institutions, it's a lot of kind of IT devices or Internet of Things devices actually within the within this infrastructure, and healthcare cybersecurity is becoming very, very critical. Actually, we invested to one of the companies in the healthcare cybersecurity space, and they recently got a big order at one of the countries here in GCC, pretty much to provide the whole healthcare system security. But I think just besides security, what is interesting about, because you have like a network protection, so you really get a fantastic corporate intelligence. You know exactly what devices are connected to the network, how often they're used. Maybe some devices are idle or some devices needs to be substituted. So it's a great supply management tool and great tool for hospitals to run this analytics. I think just very briefly, maybe on other areas, when we talk about AI, I think there are a couple of areas where AI is very in high demand. And actually, I can tell you the statistics that we see in the US, that every third dollar that comes into, I would say, MedTech or healthcare ventures goes into AI at the moment. And there are things like preciseness of diagnostics, if we are talking about imaging, radiology, MRI, CT, if we are talking about clinical decision support. And another very exciting area that AI, I think, will be transforming the industry is a drug development. I think it's a similar trend that we saw in the e-commerce in late 90s, maybe early 2000s, that actually pharma companies, they would need to become, it doesn't matter if they want to or they don't want to, they need to become AI companies, because drug development is really shifting towards AI. And actually, it's like the same what happened with big department stores, like Marks and Spencer and H&M. They were like pushed to go online, and I think the same is happening with big pharma. And just maybe on two other trends, if we talk about care shifting from hospitals to homes, I think it's all these solutions for remote patient monitoring, RPM, at home diagnostics, and digital therapeutics. I think it's all driven by cost pressures, definitely on healthcare system side. Population is aging, and also there are some incentives for the payers. And maybe the last but not least, it's about this longevity in neurotech kind of thing. I think it's very clear that all of us would like to live longer and to live healthy lives. And actually, we already have in our portfolio companies who put their mission to bring the life expectancy up to 100 years for their clients. But I think in this longevity story, it is extremely important also mental health topic. Because imagine if person is physically fit, but they're suffering dementia or they're suffering some mental illnesses. It's quite scary because physically the person is totally fit and fine, but mentally they are forgetting who they are, where to go, where they put their keys or phone or purse. And that's why I think this within the longevity also like mental longevity health is becoming very, very critical and very important because it's not just body health but mental health as well.
Well, it's interesting the way what you talk about in terms of the impact of AI, but let me double click on that and how we look at
Sure,
it.
sure.
So what we realized last 5 years was spent in solving the data problem for AI. Reality was we did not have the data to really train these models, right? And this was across the globe. What we're trying to do is get this soon, right? This is visible across segments. If you look at diagnostics, today we have a few startups from, say, Curate.ai or Niramai.ai, who've gone to radiology, and everything which could be done through pattern recognition has been automated, be it generation of test reports, be it the understanding and reading these radiology results, all of that has already been automated thanks to AI. What we see, that part is already kind of done, at least on the diagnostic side of things. Where AI is moving within diagnostics now is next is into genes, where we see genetic testing happening. And with data which was accumulated in the last 5 years, we see a lot happening there, where we'll be using AI to really understand gene sequences, to understand more of gene-based testing and get tangible results, which was not available till now. Because even though money has gone in there, tangible results were not visible till now, at least from a gene pool perspective. Right? That is one. Second, what you mentioned about pharma, I think life sciences, the biggest challenge always has been the high capex that you would put into drug discovery, right? And what we see is that has been split into buckets now. For example, discovering or figuring out which molecules do you go after and being able
Exactly.
to able to really predict the outcomes early on. AI has enabled us to do that way, way better than what we used to have earlier on. Right? Secondly, we see AI also coming into clinical testings and clinical validation of products, where we know which are the right molecules which will be useful not just for indication but cross indications, where you see multiple indications. For example, if you're trying to solve for diabetes along with, say, a person who's facing hypertension, what are the specific drugs which can be used there? So we see AI actually being used for the second layer of diagnostics also, and helping and reducing the cost which is spent on the research, which might not be fruitful. And that has really helped us come up with new drugs. And I think will be one of the key driving factors for bringing research and drug development into India, because traditionally we've not really been very active there because of the high capex, but AI has changed that. And the data is kind of helping us do that. When we talk about healthcare delivery, such as hospitals, clinic chains, what we see is two, three things again, right? So we had EMRs, electronic medical records, coming in. And in India, we built a healthcare stack where today we are actually imposed, when it's regulatory required for people to really maintain all health records in EMR, at least with large hospitals, they have to integrate with the central repository of data, right? This has changed things a lot again. With this, what you can really unlock is continuous care monitoring. You can unlock other healthcare at home, like you mentioned earlier, because now you can have devices which are connected and AI telling you, and AI doing the monitoring through the IoT devices to predict whether this is a person which needs care immediately or not. And the need for human intervention is reduced substantially over there. So certainly AI has had an impact over here, but we still see that these are early days, right? So money is going towards AI, but in India at least, there's a lot of money which is still going into infrastructure. We still see so much money going to hospitals or and hospital networks itself, right? Beyond AI, we see a lot of money which is coming in. I think last year around $4 billion came into just this sector because of the consolidation play which is coming in. What we see is that delivery, medical delivery, is shifting from multi-specialty hospitals to single specialty and focused care. What is another segment, which is of large interest for all investors here, is geriatric care. This is one segment which is opening up across the globe where we see there's going to be a lot of capital flowing. Would love to hear your thoughts on that, Paul.
No, absolutely. Look, I was just actually had a meeting today, and very interesting, particularly for Indian market, is medical tourism. Maybe it's a little bit beyond scope of sort of tech investments, but definitely it's a growing, like a huge industry. And I think there are some big players, like Apollo Hospital, like some big medical institutions and hospital chains. And I think India is competing with some countries like Turkey, for example, which is also famous with its medical sort of medical tourism services. Just maybe give you a couple of more themes that we see and that are kind of exciting. Definitely, we sort of we can talk for longer, but just to give you some flavor. I think robotics is expanding beyond surgery. I think we see not just surgical robots anymore, although it remains extremely exciting, but we see growth in hospital automation and rehab robotics. There was this, I think, a TV report. I've seen that in one of the sort of homes for an older people in Germany, the lady, she's communicating with a robot. And she says, well, actually, I enjoy it. It's not definitely the same as talking to a real human, but, they discuss news, they discuss some cooking recipes, and it is still support for an older people in this communication rather than to have none. I think another very exciting sort of topic is precision medicine. And when we're talking about all this personalized treatment through genetics based on biomarkers, on real-time data, it is all extremely it extremely shows high growth in areas like oncology, cardiology, anything to do with mental illnesses. I think what we also discussed is that medical institutions, they are becoming interconnected with many hundreds of thousands or dozens of thousand devices. And it's explosion of Internet of medical technology, of Internet of medical things in this thing. I think portable devices are becoming very exciting as well. I think what we've seen and what we invested in some of the solutions, we see like portable MRI devices that could be moved between ambulance, hospitals, and they could be even installed at home. If there is enough kind of budget and willingness, to do that. That's also becoming very important, that the even devices like MRIs, when you imagine this huge tube that you need to install, it's probably, I don't know what, in the US it might be maybe up to $5 million, to install the full room for that. But the devices are becoming smaller, cheaper, and much more mobile. I think there's what we also seen, that there is a convergence of hardware and software. It's like, again, in some MRI devices, they're integrated with the eye already. So there is a device, there is software, there is artificial intelligence and services that provided. Maybe what else? I think what you also mentioned, that there is a shift towards outcome-based healthcare. So devices, they might prove that there is cost savings, that there are some clinical outcomes. And every technology is becoming a real world evidence, and it should be mandatory. I think without it, it's extremely difficult to offer any technology or to offer any services. And I think one of the reasons we do not really do any early stages, we always go, post-revenue investments, because product market fit is extremely important. Technology could be fantastic, but are there buyers, to pay for it? And the other way around, maybe there is a lot of demand, and there is a huge market, but simply there is no technology to meet this demand. It's just extremely complex, or maybe not fully verified. And in that sense, also, maybe Harsh, you can tell us more about sort of approvals in India, but I think in the US, FDA is really important, and having an approval gives you sort of it's a barrier to entry. So I think, particularly if we talk about med devices, there is a lot of IP, a lot of patents, and there is a strong advantage for early movers, particularly in this sector. So I think still certification remains important factor, and maybe entry barrier for some companies or for some technologies. Please, back to you.
I think medical devices is a sector of interest for us for sure. In fact, the government recently came up with this PLI scheme where they were incentivizing companies to set up medical device manufacturing facilities in India and
Yeah.
supporting them in terms of tax SOPs and capital everywhere. Because we understand in terms of regulations, yes, we have regulations, the CDSCO takes care of that. But more importantly, we see that there is, like you mentioned, there's a huge scope in making medical devices portable in nature. This could be anything and everything. I think the whole world is still solving for a device which can be a portable glucose monitor, which is not intrusive in nature. We have that one monitor which we know, which is slightly intrusive, which has to go inside the skin. This actually penetrates the skin. But in recent times, I've come across at least 3 such devices which would measure your glucose levels with up to 90 to 95% accuracy, just without any kind of intrusion. You scan your fingers, something like what you would do for NOx and saturation, and you're able to monitor your glucose levels. Which is groundbreaking, because today, with the prevalence of diabetes across the globe, if we can do this without break, life is much easier for a lot of these patients. Monitoring can become much more regular. And imagine somebody, a senior citizen, doing this for themselves. And they really don't need anybody else for help to really monitor their glucose levels. So I think medical devices and becoming portable and more user-friendly is a huge piece that we see. And this is a trend which will continue deep into the next 2 to 3 years. And we'll see this happening across segments. What we are also seeing is devices which can not just monitor 1 or 2 biomarkers, but can do this for multiple biomarkers. Right? So that is another segment which will kind of encourage people to set up home ICUs, because the reality is beds concern. Right? Today, we do not have the number of beds that we should be having, and this is a problem across the globe. And see that the bed density which WHO kind of prescribes is not really met across every place. Right? What you mentioned about medical tourism, I think that's not, it's strange that you mentioned we're already advising this client based on GCC, and we see savings of as much as 50 to 60% in costs when these patients are maybe sent to, say, in India or in Egypt or Turkey for medical tourism, and with equivalent or better health outcomes. And more importantly, they don't have to wait for surgeries. I think the bigger advantage of medical tourism than cost is it reduces the waiting period, which we see in a few of these countries where the bed infrastructure is actually not so high. Secondly, there's one other trend which we see, and this is something which is very important as well. We've seen LLMs coming up, right? And you spoke about healthcare cybersecurity, but LLMs supporting clinical decision making is a double-edged sword. Right? So we see a huge opportunity still there, where you can build algorithms which will support clinical decision making. So we have advised on 2 clients in this space specifically, where instead of taking the LLM route, what they were doing is that working with doctors to understand what is the series of diagnosis, to reach appropriate diagnosis for any patient. And there's a lot of space there. There is still a lot to be done. You have to work out similar clinical decision support systems for every segment, every therapy which is there, and they're still not being solved. It's one of the most basic requirements which has long-standing impacts across the segment and still remains unchecked and untapped. We've seen that happen in radiology already. I think that has kind of been explored, but for something like oncology, it is still not yet done. People are trying to do that, but they've not yet cracked the code, is what we see. And this is something which will be the next leg of growth for sure. Lastly, what you mentioned in terms of robotics, this is something which is very, very important for us. So it's specifically if you talk about India as well as Africa, where in the hinterlands, at least of India, healthcare infrastructure is not as good, right? With the advent of robotic surgeries, this has changed completely, where a person sitting thousands of kilometers away can actually do large, complicated surgery where you don't need a specialist to really be present around you to read that. It's amazing. A smaller intervention, which we have seen impact, right? So in hinterlands where you are having more paramedics and general practitioners solving for key challenges. We've seen telemedicine itself being a big impact. We've seen telemedicine solving and training these paramedics so much well that it has actually increased life expectancy, specifically for things such as pediatrics. We've seen that the amount of children who were born preterm being able to survive has increased because of telemedicine, because the quality of care which is not available is now accessible. This access, which is as simple as telemedicine is provided, is beautiful. And when you add robotics to it, I think we can see wonders happening.
No, absolutely. And look, maybe just talking a little bit about financial part of business. I think we've seen this crazy volatility on the stock markets, from actually from early this year, and we see unfortunately this military conflict in Iran, and we saw a tariff implementation by Trump administration. But I think even in this environment, kind of sort of healthcare sector remains very resilient. It's a kind of I wouldn't say like 100% safe haven, but definitely the volatility is much less than in tech stocks or in some other industries. And we also see some kind of strong and healthy M&A environment in the healthcare. I think big players, they're acquiring AI capabilities, they're acquiring software platforms. And I think it's not just about revenue that those companies are showing, it's about capabilities. And we probably all know these names, like some strategic players like Medtronic or Johnson & Johnson or Philips or Siemens. But we see a good kind of M&A activity in the market, and um, still the IPO opportunity is still not fully opened or quite limited. And I think these M&A or private deals are quite nice and quite important exit methods in the current environment.
I think
Back to you.
I would concur to that 100%. I think healthcare is one of those sectors which is not just a safe haven, it's an evergreen sector, right? So we all know healthcare is one of those basic requirements which is here to stay. And hence has always seen a lot of private capital as well as public market money going to the sector. There's volatility, yes, but the sentiments were always strong. What we see in terms of trends and deal making here is there's a huge consolidation play. What you said in terms of M&A, we see the same trends here, where the large players are trying to see how can they really consolidate their positions in the key markets. And more importantly, there's another play where we see these innovative products being coming up, where there are lots of these entrepreneurs coming up with products, which is healthcare delivery, which could be drug discovery, and these large players who can offer distribution, because that is one of the key elements of healthcare and that's key challenges for people to scale, acquiring them, partnering with them to see how they can grow. That is one trend which will continue for the next 3 to 4 years at least, where people who have distribution networks, this could be delivery, this could be pharma distributions, they are acquiring innovative products across the segment. Another place where we see a lot of activity is integrated care. So where you're actually mixing, where you see an intersection of allopathy and Ayurveda or other forms of medicine coming in, wellness coming in. And there's another huge amount of interest that we see in wellness specifically, because with longevity, as you mentioned, right, there are everybody wants to live longer. And to do that, anything and everything is anything which helps them do that while not changing their lifestyle too much is something which is appreciated. So I think the next few years is all going to be about consolidation at the delivery level. Secondly, we see distribution-led growth, distribution-led acquisitions in innovative products, and we see a lot of explosion in wellness as such, a segment which is going to be much looked at in the next few years.
Absolutely. And just, last remark from my side, I just met also with one of them, like top managers of the huge US investment firm. It's probably top 3 biggest in the world, like massive. You definitely, all of you know the name. And they told me that the 2 sectors that they see the most potential and love the most are agriculture and healthcare. So that's multi billion dollar funds, that are sort of leading the world. That's where they see the value, and that's where they see the growth and potential. Agriculture and healthcare, it will always be there. People need to eat, and people need healthcare services to be healthy and to sort of to continue their lives. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's encouraging, Paul, and always good to back healthcare enterprises. The outcomes which they generate, that's more encouraging than anything else, right? So, healthcare is a segment which is here to stay, and I don't think there'll be a dull day in healthcare investing in Indian making ever.
Yeah.
Hemant.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very insightful conversation. I was myself making some notes, and I'm sure there are others out there who have taken some key points from this conversation. And with that, we come to the close of the fireside chat with both of you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Harsh, for this conversation once again. And with that, we will move on to our next segment.
Thank you.
Our next segment is going to be our panel discussion.